When my husband, Walter, and I went to visit my in-laws, my mother-in-law picked us up from the airport, but instead of welcoming us warmly, she said, "You can't ride in the car, so you'll have to walk home." She snorted and turned her nose up at us. The walk was 3 hours one way. Even though I'm physically strong, this felt like too much, and I almost cried. Fortunately, someone helped me in the end, and it was my mother-in-law who ended up regretting her actions. My name is Jennifer. I'm 30 years old and married to Walter, who is 2 years younger than me. I love mountain climbing, and we met in college through the mountain club. Walter is handsome and popular with women, so when he asked me out, I was surprised. I wondered, why me? Walter told me, Jennifer always moves forward silently, even on the hardest paths, without complaining. That's what I like about her. Walter works for a well-known company and earns a good salary. We've been happily married since our wedding, much like how things were when we were in college. However, one thing bothers me. Oh, it's a call from Mom. Sorry, I need to talk to her, Walter said during dinner as he rushed to his room with his phone. His mother calls him every 2 days. She adores her son, and Walter is very kind to her. Sometimes, I even wonder if he's a bit of a mama's boy, but since she raised him well, I try to respect her, too. It seems, though, she doesn't feel the same about me. Before we got married, when we went to visit my in-laws, she wasn't happy to see me. Jennifer is 2 years older than my son? She's almost 30, she said, clearly displeased. She seemed unhappy the whole time. Walter's father, however, didn't mind. He said, "It's fine, love conquers all. Jennifer seems reliable, and she's perfect for Walter, who can be a bit weak at times." But that only seemed to make my mother-in-law angrier. Since she couldn't argue with her husband directly, she started picking on me in secret. One time, she said, "Oh no, Jennifer, it looks like the snacks I gave you have gone bad. I'll get new ones." After intentionally giving me spoiled food, she would make a face, snort, and twist her lips whenever she harassed me. But I didn't let it bother me. I smiled and said, "It's okay, I can eat it." And I cut off the bad part of the dried fruit and ate the rest. My mountain climbing experience had taught me to eat what I could, even if the food wasn't great. Walter and his father laughed. "That's just like Jennifer." Walter's father then said, "Honey, that's not right. Don't give Jennifer something like that." Despite the situation, the mood remained light. I laughed, but I didn't miss the sharp look my mother-in-law gave me, or the slight sound of her clicking her tongue. There were other incidents, like when she said, "Look, I went to Italy last week and bought souvenirs." She gave Walter a high-quality branded tie, but for me, she handed over a cheap, flimsy t-shirt with a fake-looking logo, clearly a knockoff. "Come on, Walter, try on the tie. Jennifer, you try on the shirt too," she said. I saw that familiar expression on her face and realized this was another one of her little ways to harass me. I forced a smile and said, I can't wear a tie with casual clothes." I added, "I'm not up for it right now either," trying to keep the mood light, but inside, I was fed up. Later, I only used that t-shirt for chores like weeding in the summer or as a joke to show my friends in photos. I hated even looking at it. Her harassments were subtle, only I could really tell they were intentional. When I told Walter, he would just say, "Mom's a bit quirky, so just forgive her." But the small acts of malice slowly wore me down. We lived about an hour away from my in-laws, and the fact that we could easily visit them whenever they wanted was a constant source of gloom for me. Then one day, Walter gave me sudden news. "Jennifer, I'm sorry, but I've been transferred to a new location. It starts next month, so we'll need to start preparing," he said. Though Walter apologized, I secretly felt relieved. This transfer would give us an excuse to put some distance between us and his mother. Plus, the new location was close to my parents' home, which felt like moving from stress to comfort. "Got it. I'll take care of the preparations and ask my family for help," I said cheerfully, excited to get away from my mother-in-law's constant petty harassment. While I was a little nervous about starting a new life, most of my feelings were about the relief of being free from her. We moved, and I thought I could finally put some distance between us, but soon after settling in, I got another call from her. "Hello, Jennifer, where have you been? You didn't answer the phone. You're not neglecting my son while hanging out at your parents' house again, are you?" she asked, clearly accusing me. I wanted to sigh heavily, but I held back and replied, "I'm sorry, I couldn't answer earlier. I was in line at the checkout." Walter might be tired in this new environment. I wanted to support Walter with nutritious meals since he was adjusting to the new environment. But my mother-in-law started calling every 2 days. Even though we saw each other less, we talked more, though it was mostly her making snide comments. She'd say things like, "My son is sensitive. I wonder if someone with such thick skin like Jennifer can understand him. His high school girlfriend was so delicate, but his taste has really changed," making remarks that made me uncomfortable. I began to wonder if she was using me as her outlet for stress. I felt like a trash can for her frustrations. What hurt the most were her comments about children. She'd say, "Jennifer, you're already 30, aren't you? What do you think about having children? I wonder if, being older than my son, you can have a normal child." I was shocked that someone would say such a thing in this day and age. Since this was already a sensitive topic for me, I cried after hanging up the phone. Did she really think I wouldn't be hurt by her words? The calls kept coming, but I responded politely to avoid causing any drama. Maybe she got bored of not getting a reaction from me, because the number of calls gradually decreased. I felt relieved, deeply. On New Year's Day the following year, Walter and I went to visit my in-laws. They were supposed to pick us up from the airport. When we arrived, Walter's dad greeted us warmly. "Hey Walter, Jennifer, long time no see." His friendliness was a relief since I had been dreading seeing my mother-in-law. "Happy New Year, Mom and Dad," Walter said. "Happy New Year," I added. We exchanged New Year's greetings, but my mother-in-law didn't even look at me. Maybe she was angry because I had been distant on the phone. It was a tense and awkward situation, and I wasn't sure how I'd get through it. Walter's father, trying to lighten the mood, said cheerfully, "You must be tired from the journey. Shall we take a break at the airport cafe?" "Oh, that's a great idea. Isn't there one on the second floor?" Walter responded, and we all headed to the cafe. While the men chatted away, my mother-in-law and I sat in silence. After we ordered, I got up and said, "Excuse me, I'm going to the restroom," hoping for a moment to gather myself. "Oh, maybe I'll go too," my mother-in-law said, standing up to follow me. I immediately had a bad feeling about it. As we neared the entrance to the women's restroom, my mother-in-law, walking behind me, suddenly said, "You can't ride in the car, so why don't you walk back?" I didn't understand what she meant, so I turned to look at her. She had that familiar expression on her face and said, "We're going back as a family of 3. You're a stranger, aren't you?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Walk back from the airport to their house? How far could that even be? And calling me, her son's wife, a stranger? I was frozen in shock as she continued her verbal attack. "I've been kind enough to call you frequently, but unlike Walter, you only respond coldly. Living near your parents has gone to your head. I don't want to think of you as my daughter-in-law. You're a stranger, a complete stranger." Her voice was getting louder. I was shocked, but didn't want to argue in public, so I quietly said, "Yes, I understand." I didn't feel like going back to where Walter and my father-in-law were, so I headed toward the airport exit, walking slowly. Even though she told me to walk back, I was at an airport. There had to be taxis or buses. I could take one and walk the rest of the way, but more than the physical distance, I worried about what would happen when I arrived. How was I supposed to face my in-laws after all this? How would I spend the next few days there? I checked my phone for transportation options. There was a bus leaving in 10 minutes, but it wouldn't take me all the way. I'd still have to walk for about 3 hours to get to their house. 3 hours. I could walk that easily with my mountain climbing experience, but this wasn't the same. Walking, because I wasn't allowed in the car due to harassment, felt different. Tears welled up in my eyes. Was this my fault? Had I been too distant with her on the phone? Would this have happened if I had been more pleasant? While lost in thought, someone suddenly tapped me on the shoulder. "Jennifer, why are you walking here?" It was my father-in-law's voice. "Did my wife say something to you at the restroom entrance? I was headed there too and saw you two talking. Then you just started walking away," he said. As my father-in-law stood in front of me, ready to walk, the tears I had been holding back finally spilled over. Seeing his kind face, I couldn't stop crying. "Jennifer, what on earth happened?" he asked. I decided to tell him everything. I explained exactly what my mother-in-law had said to me. To my surprise, my father-in-law became angrier than I had ever seen him. "She said that to my son's wife?" he exclaimed. Then, he said something unexpected. "I'll walk with you, Jennifer." Without hesitation, he started walking. I was shocked. Father-in-law," I started. "Don't worry," he said. "I enjoy mountain climbing. I used to climb a lot with Walter when he was younger. A 3-hour walk is nothing." Indeed, his stride was strong and confident. Not what you'd expect from someone 62 years old. Come on, let's go. Suddenly, I remembered something. We didn't tell Walter we were leaving, is that okay? In my shock over my mother-in-law's words, I had just walked off without thinking. Father-in-law reassured me, Walter will be fine. She'll probably talk him into waiting. I'll contact him. He took out his phone and sent a text to mother-in-law, telling her that he was walking back with me and that the car keys were in his bag. As we waited for the bus, his phone rang. Father-in-law answered it, sounding angry but controlled. It must have been mother-in-law on the other end. I could hear her voice shouting, trying to explain. I heard what you said to Jennifer. My father-in-law said firmly, if you're going to say that, I won't ride in the car either. I could hear my mother-in-law's panicked response, that's not it. She said she wanted to walk for exercise. How brazen. I was more stunned than angry. Father-in-law cut her off. We'll talk when we get home. He hung up and shoved his phone into his pocket. A moment later, my phone started ringing. It was definitely mother-in-law trying to call me. Father-in-law and I exchanged looks. We both decided to ignore it. I wasn't in the mood to deal with her. We silently boarded the bus and, once we got off, continued walking. This way's a shortcut, father-in-law said. There's a slope for a while, but let's do our best. With his occasional advice, it felt like we were mountain climbing together. However, I hadn't planned on walking so much today. I was wearing regular boots, and father-in-law was in leather shoes. This wasn't ideal for such a long walk. During the journey, I barely spoke but eventually asked, father-in-law, are your feet okay? Won't walking in those shoes hurt after a while? He glanced at my feet, noticing my boots, and squinted thoughtfully. I guess we're in the same boat, my father-in-law said, sighing. Making a woman walk such a long distance in those shoes, unbelievable. We thought about calling a taxi, but neither of us suggested it. We both wanted to spite my mother-in-law. But Jennifer, you're strong, he added, walking such a long distance without complaining. That's probably why Walter was drawn to you. Hearing that made me feel a bit happy. We continued our walk, stopping at a grocery store for drinks to stay hydrated. After about 3 hours, as the sun was setting, we finally arrived at my in-laws' house. Their car was parked outside, so my mother-in-law and Walter were already home. We're back, my father-in-law said as he opened the front door. Walter rushed over. Jennifer, I was so worried. Why did you suddenly decide to walk back for exercise? Did Mom tell you that? I asked, surprised. That's not what happened. Mom told me to walk back. Father-in-law, now sitting tiredly on a chair, added, Jennifer didn't choose to walk. Your mom told her to. Mother-in-law came out of the living room, her face pale and shocked. No, that's not it. It's a misunderstanding, she stammered. What misunderstanding? I couldn't stay quiet anymore. You said, since you can't ride in the car, why don't you walk back, didn't you? That's the truth. I'm not going to lie about it. I smiled bitterly, adding, I was reminded of my mountain climbing days. That 3-hour walk was good exercise. Walter turned to look at his mother. He knew I wasn't the type to lie. The three of us, Walter, father-in-law, and I, stared at her. You believe this woman over me? She screamed. We're your family. She's a stranger, right? You believe a stranger over your own family? So I'm not allowed in the car because I'm a stranger? I said quietly. Mom, I can't believe you would say something like that, Walter said, his voice trembling with anger. Jennifer is an important part of my family. I wanted you to feel the same way. Walter clenched his fist, visibly upset. If you're going to treat Jennifer like this, I'm done with you. Mom, I won't answer your calls anymore, and don't contact Jennifer either. With that, he took my hand and said, let's go. Wait, Walter, his mother called out. But Walter slammed the door behind us without looking back. He held my hand tightly as we left. A year later. Hey, Jennifer, Walter, over here, you can see the view really well, Walter called out. Walter, my father-in-law, and I were mountain climbing together. 6 months after the New Year's incident, Walter received a transfer order, and we moved back to our previous home. After that, father-in-law decided to divorce my mother-in-law and move to a place near us. We started climbing together on weekends, and it became a regular activity. Shall we have lunch here? Walter suggested when we reached the summit. We eagerly began preparing our meal, and as we worked, father-in-law started talking. Your mom went on a spending spree after the divorce, he said. Even though we divided everything fairly, she's already having financial trouble. I think she was lonely. The divorce was tough on her, with all the crying and screaming. He paused, then added, but I think it's better for both of us to keep some distance now. She needs to expand her world, otherwise, she'll just keep taking out her stress on the people close to her. I listened quietly to their conversation, thinking about what he said, looking out at the beautiful view from the mountain. I made a promise to myself, I will cherish my own world and not take out my stress on others. With my precious family by my side, I felt at peace,